Anakin Skywalker is one of the most misunderstood characters in cinematic history, and it's time we stopped telling the story the same way over and over again. He wasn't just some gifted Jedi who lost his way, he was a symbol of how systems fail the very people they rely on. People call him a villain because it's easier than confronting the uncomfortable truth he represents. And if you really look at the cracks in the Republic and the choices forced on him, you might start to wonder if he was ever truly wrong. There's something eerie about watching a hero unravel and realizing the world around him was more broken than he ever was. The Republic wasn't thriving, it was decaying behind polished speeches and red robes, and Anakin was one of the few who saw it clearly. He grew up in chains, and when he rose above it all, he found himself serving a different kind of prison, one built by fear and silence. And when a system punishes you for questioning it, what do you really become, if not the very thing they were afraid of? This isn't a defense of Anakin's worst actions, it's a spotlight on everything that led him to those moments. Because we can't talk about the fall without acknowledging the push, and Anakin was pushed hard by the Jedi. The Senate, the war, and even the people he tried to save. He was never meant to be a pawn, yet every side treated him like one. And if you've ever felt like screaming into a void of rules and traditions that make no sense, you'll understand why he did what he did. For years we've blamed him for the collapse of a galaxy, but what if he was just the consequence of a galaxy that had already collapsed? The Jedi failed him, the Senate used him, and the war consumed him. And through all of that, he kept trying to do what he believed was right, even if the galaxy called it wrong. Maybe the scariest part isn't that Anakin turned, maybe it's that in his position, we would have done the same. In this video, we're flipping the narrative to explore why Anakin was right about everything, and how the Republic was never what it claimed to be. We'll uncover the cracks in the Jedi Order, expose the corruption at the heart of the Senate, and break down why. Anakin's choices weren't madness, they were clarity. By the end of this, you might not just understand him, you might agree with him. So stay with me, because this story is far from over. From the outside, the Republic looked like a well-oiled machine. But dig just a little, and you'll see it was already rotting from within. The Senate was bloated with corrupt politicians, swayed more by profit and status than by justice or peace. Every major decision was entangled in bureaucracy so thick it paralyzed the very people it claimed to serve. It wasn't a beacon of democracy, it was a dying empire, trying to hold itself together with hollow speeches and fake smiles. The Jedi kept calling themselves peacekeepers, but they had become enforcers for this broken system. They stopped questioning what they were defending, and who was actually benefiting from it. The people in the Outer Rim weren't protected, they were forgotten, neglected, and trampled under the weight of politics they didn't even vote for. And Anakin saw that he felt that weight every time he was sent to clean up the messes the Senate wouldn't admit to causing. He wasn't blind to what was happening, he was one of the few who dared to say it out loud. He saw how the Jedi Council bowed to the will of the Senate, instead of standing firm on their principles. They would delay missions that could save lives, because of political pressure. They would ignore suffering because it didn't fit the narrative or serve their image as noble protectors. Anakin grew up in chains, so he knew exactly what injustice looked like. When the people in charge start valuing structure more than freedom, that's not order, that's oppression with a fancy title. The Republic was no longer about the people, and Anakin refused to pretend it was. He didn't fall because he was wrong, he fell because he saw too much, and no one wanted to listen. They told him to bury his feelings, to kill off attachments, and let go of the people he loved. But love isn't weakness, it's what drives people to protect what matters most. Anakin's love for Padme, his loyalty to his friends, his need to shield the innocent, those were never flaws, they were his core. And when the Jedi treated those things like poison, they proved they didn't understand humanity anymore. Anakin didn't want power for power's sake, he wanted control, because no one else seemed willing to make the hard decisions. He watched helplessly as the Jedi stood still, while the galaxy burned. They preached peace, but sent him to war, and expected him to return, untouched, unscarred, unchanged. They demanded obedience without compassion, and called it the Jedi way. How can you expect someone to serve justice in a world that refuses to show mercy? Anakin's struggle wasn't about ego, it was about survival in a system that broke everyone who dared to care too much. The Jedi called him dangerous because he was honest, and they feared what honesty would reveal. In trying to suppress what made him human, they lost sight of what made them Jedi. Everyone says Palpatine manipulated Anakin like a puppet, and sure, he pulled strings, but the seeds were already there long before Anakin was drowning in contradictions. The Jedi told him to suppress fear, but sent him into battle. The Jedi told him not to form attachments, but handed him soldiers who would die for him. Palpatine just knew how to speak to the cracks the Order had already carved into him. The Chancellor didn't invent Anakin's doubts, he confirmed them. He gave voice to the feelings Anakin was punished for having. He didn't create the storm, he just showed Anakin he wasn't crazy for noticing it. And in a galaxy where every other voice told him to fall in line, that kind of validation was irresistible. It felt like the only truth in a sea of scripted lies. People forget that Palpatine didn't offer Anakin power at first. He offered empathy. He asked how Anakin felt when no one else cared to. He saw his pain and didn't dismiss it. He used it, yes, but before that, he acknowledged it. And when someone is that alone, that seen, even twisted comfort feels like salvation. The real tragedy is that the Jedi could have saved him if they had just listened. If even one person on the council had tried to understand instead of control him, things could have ended differently. But they didn't, and that silence was louder than any Sith whisper. By the time Palpatine offered the dark side, Anakin had already been pushed off the edge. The Clone Wars were supposed to be a necessary evil, a temporary sacrifice for lasting peace, but all it did was drag heroes into the mud. Anakin didn't get a break. He was expected to win battles and lose nothing in return. But every mission chipped away at who he was, not just physically but emotionally, mentally, spiritually. He didn't just lead soldiers, he bonded with them, and then watched them die over and over again. How do you return from that unchanged? How do you walk back into the Jedi Temple and pretend everything is fine when you've buried friends and made choices that haunt you at night? They asked him to be more than human but less than whole, and that's a paradox no one survives. And while Anakin fought for the Republic, he saw firsthand how little the Senate cared about the lives being lost. Planets abandoned after liberation, people treated like numbers, peace deals, sabotaged by politics. He wasn't disillusioned because he was naive, he was disillusioned because he had clarity. He saw the war machine for what it was, and he couldn't unsee it. Anakin never stopped trying to do the right thing, even when his actions were labeled wrong. He tried to stop death, he tried to protect lives, he tried to fix a broken system with the only tools he had. People love to call him a villain, but ignore the context that made him desperate. When you feel powerless, even terrible choices can feel like the only options. He was told to save the galaxy, and punished for how he tried to do it. He was told to trust the Jedi, while they actively distrusted him. He was caught between two masters, one that lied with cruelty, and one that lied with smiles. No matter where he turned, someone wanted to use him, but no one wanted to understand him. We remember Vader's fall, but we forget Anakin's pain. We judged the mask, but ignored the man who wore it, the one who was scared and cornered, and convinced he had no other way. He didn't abandon morality, he redefined it based on survival, based on experience. When the rules failed him, he made his own, and that made people afraid. Anakin was never the problem, he was the mirror. He reflected everything the Jedi Order refused to acknowledge. And instead of fixing the cracks, they shattered the glass and called him the reason it broke. But he wasn't wrong for feeling, he was wrong for believing they'd ever change. Anakin wasn't a perfect man, but he was a reflection of a broken system that refused to heal. He didn't lose faith in the Force, he lost faith in those who claimed to speak for it. And when every path led to silence or suffering, he chose a voice that promised change. The tragedy isn't that he fell, it's that he was right, and no one listened until it was too late. He tried to be the hero the Republic needed, and got punished for it. He spoke uncomfortable truths, and got labeled unstable. He asked for help, and got met with fear. Every time he tried to fix something, it broke further, not because of him, but because the foundations were already cracked. He wasn't the destroyer, he was the consequence. The real heartbreak is knowing he could have saved everything if anyone had truly believed in him. All he wanted was peace and love and clarity in a galaxy that offered him war, loss, and confusion. And even in his final moments as Vader, he reached out to save his son, proving the light never left him. It was buried, not erased. So maybe Anakin didn't betray the galaxy, maybe the galaxy betrayed Anakin. And in the end, he still fulfilled the prophecy, not through obedience, but through defiance. Because he saw the truth before anyone else did. And sometimes being right is the loneliest fate of all.